everyone. My name is Nazia Hussain, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our first webinar of the year, hosted by the Institute of Sustainability Studies. These webinars are basically designed to demystify sustainability topics by stripping away jargon and fostering focused discussions that can really help businesses and individuals turn commitment into action. And today, I am thrilled to have all of you join me for an exclusive session, CSRD, Clearing the Fog, Finding the Path, being delivered by Mark Kane. Mark is a distinguished faculty member at ISS with extensive experience in sustainability. He has successfully guided numerous organizations in leveraging technology to really advance sustainability and ESG initiatives. And I'm excited to explore the fundamentals of CSRD with him today. And just as a housekeeping note, since we are streaming live on LinkedIn, I encourage all of you to share your questions, comments, and thoughts as we progress in this conversation. You can leave them all in the LinkedIn comments section, and I'll get around to asking Mark to address all of them towards the end. I invite Mark to deliver the session. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Nazia, and welcome everybody who's joining us online. When Nazia and I were talking about doing a CSRD webinar, we were immediately agreeing that there's a lot of doom and gloom and sort of fear created over CSRD. So that's where we said, look, let's clear the fog. And when we then sort of were searching for a sort of image, this one actually stood out. It was sort of the real Oz on the yellow brick road and the fog. So we actually ran with that theme. So I'm hoping that that nearly everybody at some stage in their life has seen The Wizard of Oz, so they'll get the analogies and they get the context. That's the theme that we're going with. So what is CSRD? This emerald city on the hill that we're walking towards. So put succinctly, if I could say the word succinctly, CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, it requires companies that are in scope for the legislation to disclose their climate, environmental, social and governance data in a standard electronic format. And very importantly, any sustainability claims that they are making in there will need to be independently verified. They need to be audited. And that's a big positive change. So what are some of the benefits of CSRD? Really, this standardized reporting in the ESEF format, that's going to mean that all of the answers can be collated and compared. It's going to help with policy making. It's going to help with sort of analysis and decisions at EU level going forward. Something that I really like in the legislation is that it requires that companies have to report their actual emissions, their carbon equivalent emissions, across all scopes of emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, which we'll touch on in a moment. And that is the actual emissions. They can report carbon credits, but they can't sort of net them off and say we're net zero just by using carbon credits. The great thing about that is that puts the impetus on decarbonization is what we need to be doing over buying our way out through carbon credits. Another really big part of it is that the claims have to be independently verified, and that's going to tackle greenwashing and fraudulent claims because they have to be backed up, they have to be traceable. And the other part about having to report all of the emissions, including what are called scope 3, the supply chain emissions, means that large organizations will be looking to their suppliers for closer collaboration. And we're already seeing that in action. I've seen the big offshore wind developer constructor Ørsted requires its major suppliers to have 100% renewable energy procurement. I've seen Microsoft are now pushing their suppliers to do the same because scope 3 are generally 80%, 70-80% of a company's total footprint. It's a big opportunity for them to have a positive influence on their supply chain. So who are the organizations in scope? If you meet two of these three criteria, you've either greater than 250 employees, you've greater than 50 million annual turnover, or you have 25 million in assets. I'm imagining those ruby slippers are worth about 25 million. You meet two of those criteria, you're in scope to report in January 2026 for 2025 data. So you might be a small company. I have one customer, they're about 40 people, but they meet the other two criteria. So that's it's two of the three. In terms of the timeline and the clock is ticking, those are the ones in scope for now. Later on, listed SMEs will come into scope. So even the munchkins will be eventually in scope. So you might ask, well, okay, what if I don't comply to this? So, there's a very famous phrase, which is, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So you can have extensive fines that could be levied against your organization. You could see yourself being excluded from public procurement tenders, and there's reputational damage if in terms of with your own customers if you're not CSRD compliant. So let's come to the crux of it. What is there to fear? And I feel that a lot of the webinars that we've seen over the last 12 months about CSRD were exactly that. The great and powerful Oz, this is going to be so complicated. It's going to be really difficult. You're going to need an army of people from us to implement this for you. Don't pay attention to that man behind the curtain. But there are things that need to be addressed and they need to be tackled. It is a very significant data gathering exercise, and it's inside the organization and it's outside the organization with your scope 3 emissions and with your supply chain. In the legislation, there are approximately 1,144 data points. Not all of them are mandatory. It depends. Certain ones are dependent on the type of industry that you're in. But one thing that is important is you need to have a system of record, not Excel, because you need to be able to provide that traceability and auditability. And if an auditor comes in and sees all of your data in an Excel sheet, which is the old school way that a lot of CSOs had to suffer, that's not going to be sufficient. Okay. And the important thing as well is, if you think it's a 2026 problem because you have to report then, it's not. It's for your 2025 data. So you need to be gathering it now. Okay. So what needs to be reported? This is as simple as I suppose we could put it, and we've taken we've sliced and diced from a technology that we're going to talk about that helps to sort of present it. So one of the first activities that needs to happen is what's called a double materiality assessment, and I'll explain that on the next slide. And we have actually, I think, the ideal analogy for that. But in terms of reporting, there are general disclosures, and then there are reporting across the areas of environmental, social, and governance. So you need to make report data on climate, on pollution, on water, etc. in the environmental space. You have to report on your own workforce. And a lot of these are text-based answers. There's a lot of numeric answers. There's monetary answers. So there is a lot of work to pull this information together. From that, we're going to have certain targets on climate. We'll have decarbonisation targets. We will have other sort of KPIs that we have to disclose. What are our KPIs? Eventually, we're generating it out into the CSRD report, which has to be in this digital format, XHTML with the XBRL tagging, so that the data can be collated at the EU level. So what is double materiality? We tend to sort of think of risk management as something that we look at the risks to our business, and in terms of focused on the business. But double materiality is also saying what's the in terms of the impact that our organization is having on the planet and people. So if you think about the traditional risk management of financial materiality is, in this case, what's the impact that climate change could have on us, that house being our organization, but also what's the impact that our organization can have on people and the planet. And we see the poor wicked witch of the East there has come a cropper because of the actions of our organization. So what are some of the big sort of rocks within CSRD? Emissions reporting. Organizations need to report their full scope of emissions. And as we said, without netting off using carbon credits, they can be reported separately. This is a fantastic part of the legislation that ensures that we're not sort of clouding the waters. We're not claiming to have no emissions, or we're not doing anything, the actual emissions. It really pushes the decarbonisation message. And we need to demonstrate how our decarbonisation targets are going to align to the Paris Accord. And that means that starting from where we were, we have to sort of achieve a reduction to 2030 of our emissions. The best approach to prove that alignment is submitting the information to the Science Based Targets Initiative. And one sort of key thing there as well is to choose the right base year for reporting, because if you've implemented a lot of sustainability initiatives, you might have put in solar PV, you might have done sort of electric fleet, you may have done quite a lot of things. You need to go back and try and pick a base year before you start all that, because otherwise you're not getting credit for that. So that's just a simple trick to apply to make sure that you're getting credit for everything that you're doing. In terms of explaining scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, there's a meme that is well known in the sustainability space, and it's two photographs of Leonardo DiCaprio. The first is in The Wolf of Wall Street holding up a cocktail glass, and that's all scope 1 and 2 emissions. And then there's another one in The Revenant after he's been attacked by a bear, and that's the scope 3 emissions. They're a lot more complicated to calculate, to quantify, because they're within your supply chain. And there's 15 categories of emissions within scope 3, including things such as employee commutes, which is something that, until recently companies, didn't really consider as theirs, but they're part of your scope 3 emissions. Now, I'm not going to go through this data. This is just to sort of try and see, well, what are the type of things that we're being asked to submit? I just want to show that there's different elements of data here. So one is where they're asking for, they're asking for numbers, they're asking for percentages. So around the greenhouse gas emissions, they want the numbers, they want the targets, they want how you're going to reduce it, all of this information. There are a lot of text-based answers needed in CSRD in terms of what are your policies around certain things. How is the company structured? All of these areas. This is an extract from the governance section. So narrative answers. And then there's figures. If you remember that this is after the scarecrow got his brain and he was talking about the hypotenuse. So you've got calculations. So you'll see there total number of employees. So there's information coming out of the HR system. There's revenues that you're making from certain areas. So things that are coming out of your finance system. So how does technology help with this? So the first thing is that CSRD is not something you can just throw at the CSO and say, okay, get on with this. This requires collaboration across the organization. You're going to need help, a lot of work in from the finance function, from the HR function, from the IT function, from operations. So the first thing is just in terms of identifying and prioritizing all the different sort of projects that you need to do and in what sequence, and make sure that people are aligned to that. So one of the technologies that we use for this is called Digitopia. In terms of this goes beyond just CSRD, but it's for the entire sustainability roadmap in terms of identifying what are the priorities that we need to go after. But that's with alignment to sort of what the C-suite are agreeing. They're agreeing on where we're at, where we need to get to, and the size of the effort to get there. So from top right down to the left is the priority initiatives. Then you need a system of record for your carbon footprint across scopes 1, 2, and 3. This is a technology that's called CarbonFit, extremely useful for managing that submission to the science-based targets in terms of establishing your decarbonisation targets and making the submission to science-based targets, because it's their validation that you need as evidence that you have aligned to the Paris Accord. And then this is reconstructed from the earlier slide. This is really where your dashboard for managing how am I progressing in terms of everything that I need to respond to. So this is something that shows like all of the responses needed across the general disclosures, environmental, social, and governance. How many of them are done? The materiality assessment and how that aligns, and that's something that you can sort of slice and dice by owner and see, well, are we progressing in with one area? Is one area falling behind? Dashboards are a fantastic way to manage a project because they tell you the truth of what's the status. Instead of people going around the table and giving their update, the data doesn't lie, and if the data is not updated, it's going to not tell you the picture that somebody might be trying to spin about how far they've got. Beyond that, this technology is very good at suggesting the text-based answers. So it's using AI, genuinely using AI in terms of pointing inside of the organization to say, from the knowledge within the organization, from the integrated management system, from the policies and procedures, what can I gauge and what can I sort of put there as an answer? And AI is a massive accelerator for addressing the requirements that need to be filled out. The first year of CSRD is the year of the heaviest lifting, and then you have things in place, and you can start to, it's going to start to taper off in terms of the effort. So what are the recommendations? So the first thing is, this is not something that just the CSO can do. This needs a cross-functional team. So you're going to need, you're going to need HR, you're going to need finance, you're going to need IT. I'm not saying which one is which. If in doubt, consult an expert. We're here, at your disposal. You absolutely have to leverage technology because you have to produce it in a digital format. You need to have a system of record, but you should also leverage technology to get you there faster. I'm sure a lot of people have used ChatGPT, and I'm sure some of you have this week started using DeepSeek. I've talking with a great startup yesterday who are using AI for the automatic calculation of all scopes of emissions, and they're going to be leveraging DeepSeek for that because it's a far smaller footprint itself. So they're not only accelerating the process, but they're also making sure that their technology is sustainable. And the last thing to say is, like, don't wait. This is not a 2026 problem. It's a 2025 problem. So to leave it on a really positive note, I'm hoping with that whistle-stop tour analogy, you'll realize, in fact, CSRD is not something to be scared of. There's a lot of work in it, but it's not as foggy. There's a clear path to doing it in terms of the steps that need to be taken. And as Glinda said, when she actually told Dorothy that she could have got home all this time, you've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. And just to ourselves, I'm, as Nazi said, I'm on the faculty of the Institute of Sustainability Studies. We're also a team of executives with CSO and CIO expertise, and we're the technology partners for Digitopia, CarbonFit, and Pulse, and we leverage those technologies to get you there faster. We essentially help you to switch on sustainability. And that's back to Nazia.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark, for that excellent overview of CSRD. And like you said, it's clearing the fog. No need to fear. We'll get around to doing this. So let me kickstart by actually asking you a question that one of our attendees has posed just around clearing the air about how CSRD is, and if not, mandatory for NGOs, and does it impact charities? Let's start with just clearing the air around that.
Yeah, well, the in-scope organizations, I think it's approximately 50,000 in-scope organizations, as we said, turnover of 50 million, assets of 25. That's something that moved up. It was originally 40 and 20, 250 employees, but that's excluding that sector. So, yeah. But the thing that I think is worth noting, it's important to state, is that there are a lot of companies who are not in scope for CSRD, but have to anticipate that their major customers are going to be asking them for information on their carbon emissions, their direct emissions. So it's very important for companies to have a certified carbon footprint that they can provide to these customers. If they don't do that, what these large customers are going to do, they're going to estimate. They're going to estimate based on the spend, and typically what's going to come out is going to actually look worse for your organization in their eyes than what your actual footprint is. And when it comes around to the next round of tenders, and your competitor has given this information and you haven't, and they're looking better, what easier way for them to sort of to decarbonize, because the large companies have done an awful lot to decarbonize their scope 1 and 2. Their scope 3 is the big opportunity. So you don't want to put yourself at a competitive disadvantage. So that's, yeah, I suppose that's the point that I wanted to make.
Yeah. Of course, we have, and you did cover around just data compliance, and with the sheer volume of data that needs to be collected in order to become eligible for CSRD reporting, what skills would you think that organizations need to develop at this stage, and how exactly can we ensure that we get that alignment between leadership and the sustainability teams and every other stakeholder that's going to be involved in this process?
Yeah. I always like to say is that you generally have the skills in the organization, and it's about it's about leveraging them. So one of the things I say is that in talks the chief sustainability officer may not realize, but their greatest ally in the organization, natural ally, is the chief information officer, the person who knows where all the data is. And also the chief financial officer and the head of finance. So it's really about getting those people together and making sure, CFO is going to really care about this anyway, because this is a compliance issue. So it may well sit with them. But those are three very key skills you have to have there. You also have to have HR in there. You'll find that you have a lot of the data sitting in places. They may be in silos. So there's one of the elements to do is to work through in terms of what's been asked for and map to what system do we have that in, and just come up with it to identify where you have gaps, because I'd say it's very likely that you'll have gaps in around information such as employee commutes, but there may be clever ways that you can calculate that. If you have, based on the HR system, the home address of people, based on your login systems, you may have, the days that people come to the office and the days that they don't. With your expenses system, what travel they're doing. So there's a lot of things that you can sort of just cleverly utilize there. So it's really about, as we see in the world of sustainability, it's about collaboration. And let's break down these department silos. This is very much CSO, CFO, CIO, HR working together as a team.
Since we're talking about cross-departmental and cross-divisional work and effort, who exactly is responsible for conducting the double materiality assessment? Is it going to be an effort of just a singular team, or again, cross-divisional?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes across the organization. It's the thing is that this is so timely for this conversation, because conversations that we've been having about double materiality, people are on board generally. A lot of companies are very good, have good risk management procedures in place, and they're doing it potentially at the individual departmental level, but they are rolling it up, and the ones with the highest severity are already getting reviewed by senior management or by the board. So that's something that in some companies already well established. Obviously, we'd encourage organizations to follow that approach of always sort of measuring with sort of the likelihood and impact meets the severity, and that determines who needs to address it. Does it stay at that level, or does it go up to the board? But when it comes to the double materiality, and you say to them, well, what you see is the impacts of climate change on you, they sort of say, oh, I think we're fine. Now, we just had the storm last week. How many how many businesses were cut off without power. I spoke with somebody who's it was knocked out. They couldn't operate on Monday because all of their systems were down. So what's your mitigation strategy? And that's something that board level, senior management level, they absolutely care about that. That's essentially, how do we mitigate for this going forward? So it is, again, it's at that at that top level of the organization. But what I always like to say, both with sort of risks and with opportunities, the people on the front lines are the ones who see a lot of the opportunities to improve. They also see a lot of the risks, and you need to create a mechanism whereby you're encouraging that to be shared so that it can get to the right level can be addressed. So it's across the organization.
Absolutely. And I'm not so sure if we have this figure, Mark, but would you be able to tell us approximately how many companies in Ireland come under the directive? We know it's 50,000 companies across the EU, but would you be able to give us a figure around just those eligible in Ireland?
Yeah. I feel like Ross McWhirter, I finally got stumped because I don't know the figure in Ireland. What I do know is that when the legislation was transposed into Irish law, there was a mistake made, and it immediately would have applied to all listed companies, including the SMEs. So I don't have that number.
Yeah, but I think we just have to go back to the eligibility criteria and see who fits there. I want to ask you, Mark, around just the fact that, of course, CSRD is going to apply across 26 EU member states, each with its own regulatory frameworks. Now, do you foresee challenges in achieving that consistency? And how should companies plan for this? Because there are multiple reporting frameworks that companies have already been reporting under. And how do they navigate the overlap that several frameworks now impose?
Yeah. Well, the positive is this was not a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and coming up with something brand new. These standards were heavily sort of influenced by the Global Reporting Initiative. So anybody who's been working according to the GRI will see a lot of familiarity within there. To me, it's something that lifts all boats. It's something that gives us the ability to measure across all of these sectors, across all of these countries. So I see it as a huge positive at EU level. When you use data to inform decision making, we know data-driven organizations way outperform non-data driven organizations. So if we're having this data at EU level and be able to drive policies through the facts, through the data, I think it's a real positive. I think what we're going to see is, as we see with everything, is that in different countries that have stronger lobbying for certain things, they'll be pushing for exemptions or delays. So that's what we're probably going to see. In terms of there may be somebody want to take an element out of it or delay it or kick the can down the road. But I see the legislation as it's designed. While it creates an overhead for organizations, it's for the greater good, and the motivation in it to focus on decarbonisation versus carbon offsetting, I think, was a great approach. We're not saying to organizations, well, don't bother with carbon credits. By all means, if you're buying voluntary carbon credits, you are putting funding through to sort of communities or to projects, but it's not going to let you sort of claim that you're squeaky clean when you still have a lot of emissions.
I agree on that. I think there's a bit of a confusion that I can see in the comments. People have just been asking around that if there's not one single person responsible for example, conducting the DMA or even writing up the sustainability statement, then who's responsible? Is it just that one person of its entire teams? And if somebody aspires to be that one person responsible for doing the reporting under the directive, how do they become eligible to do that?
Yeah, well, like in an organization that has a chief sustainability officer, they're going to chair this. And it doesn't matter if they are, in terms of seniority, if there's others they need to pull in, the loyalty is to the project. So they're in charge, and they're pulling in the others. There may be other organizations where they haven't got a dedicated chief sustainability officer, or they may decide it's going to sit with the CFO because of compliance. So you will have somebody in charge, but you need to be able to pull across the discipline. So look at it as it's a project. It's a cross-functional project, and it's going to draw on the different disciplines. And when it comes to year one of CSRD, really the people they would want to be, you need to have some dedicated resources to it.
I agree. I did a bit of digging on this site to just understand if we can get a specific number in terms of how many companies in Ireland are eligible. And it turns out it's roughly 1,500 large enterprises. So that's a ballpark figure that we can let our participants know. Another question, of course, is just going back to charities, and are charities specifically in the UK included or excluded under CSRD? And I think the simple answer is that they are, if they're large enterprises.
Well, I'm not sure in terms of with how things are with the UK. I think it involves, if you're talking about later on non-EU companies.
Yes, it would be in the non-EU companies.
Depending on the size of their revenues or operations in the EU, then they become in scope. But I won't claim to be up to date with what's going on in the UK, because they seem to not know what they're doing since they voted for Brexit. So.
Yeah. What long-term impact do you think CSRD is going to have on businesses in terms of, is it going to fundamentally reshape boardroom discussions and priorities?
Well, when it comes to sustainability, I've talked to a lot of companies over the years, and so some of them embraced it because they know it's the right thing to do. Others, they let out a sigh because they realize, yes, we know we need to do this, but really do we have to do it now? And others just say, look, we don't have time for this. It's really about, I guess, the important thing is to reframe the conversation. And when you're talking with somebody about sustainability, you just have to tell them that, the opportunity in doing this, the opportunity in doing this exercise. When it comes to decarbonisation, there's cost savings, as we said. Then in terms of your other large customers, there's competitive advantage, and not putting yourself at a disadvantage. When it comes to CSRD and compliance, talking about access to tenders, you're talking about, potentially it's going to be your cost of credit. So there's in terms of the compliance of this and implementing this is a real positive to organizations in terms of what's going to accrue to them, and getting structures in place and getting systems in place that are sort of giving the proper visibility of what's going on in their organization. So the first year of it's going to be very difficult for companies because it's a big exercise. It becomes easier thereafter when they've systemized, when they've automated, when they've established things that maybe they haven't done before. So I think it's going to improve their performance. It's going to improve their governance. So in that regard, I see it as a huge positive. Also in the long term, and particularly because we're in a situation where the EU needs to sort of take a lead in the world in terms of decarbonisation. We see what's just happened there in the US, being pulled out of the Paris Accord. We do see a lot of positives in China with regard to their massive expansion of renewables and clean energy there. But the EU is there, this legislation really sort of is the lifting the bar for everybody else.
Absolutely. And let's just venture into the potential omnibus. We do know, and there's a timely question out there around that, about how, if companies who have been preparing for CSRD and then they just suddenly fall out of scope, what should they do, given that they would have put in the time and the effort and, of course, the cost that's involved in this process? So what will the impact be on the transposition of CSRD into national legislation if the omnibus does make those changes that are being discussed currently?
Mm-hmm. Well, like the exercise is not wasted. Consider it a
Yeah,
dress rehearsal. You know, they may come in scope later, or it may reduce
yeah,
down what they need to do.
yeah,
I just think it's better to be prepared. You know, it's better to have something and not need it,
yeah,
than need it and not have it. But even sort of those discussions that are going to be taking place in the organization about how are we doing this, and sort of oh, we're not doing anything in this regard. Should we be doing something in terms of what's our social impact? It's a very healthy set of conversations to be had around the organization. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be waiting in hope that you're going to get a reprieve. You know, I think the thing is that if you're currently in scope, um, you know, the thing is then to make a start. You know,
yeah,
start to understand it.
yeah,
You know, there's you know, hopefully that this webinar is there to take a little bit of the fear away of it.
yeah,
You know, it is a big exercise, but it is not something you don't need, you know, to be daunted by it. It's, as we say, in terms of a path, there's, you know, sort of, it's all about take that next step, and the path opens up as you go. So, you know,
yeah,
understand it, carry out the
yeah,
double materiality assessment, and then you can start to dive into the others. And the great thing is, you might think it's an overwhelming exercise to do your sort of scope 3 emissions, but you know, technology is with AI, you know, is incredibly useful in that regard, because you can sort of take all your, at this stage, you can take all your invoices, you can take a CSV straight out of your finance system, and you can have
yeah,
it calculate, and you can point that back to the suppliers who you might have been chasing for information, say, well, this is what we're calculating you
yeah,
are. And they say, oh, no,
yeah,
we're actually a lot better than that. And then they'll come and they'll provide it for you. So,
yeah,
you know, really don't think of it, of technology as just to generate out the report. It can
yeah.
really speed the process for you at every stage of the journey.
Yeah. And I think that's the jump start you need, to just get started in this process and use different technology forums and, of course, softwares that are being developed, even those that can actually simplify doing the DMA, right? Because there are the best part about, I think, the ESRS standards, the support to the CSRD directive is the whole XBRL tagging, right? Because there's softwares out there that can actually make this entire process so much faster, right? So I agree that technology in itself is going to be a game changer if you just leverage it to your advantage. But at the same time, how can sort of smaller companies with limited resources who envision becoming eligible for CSRD in the say next 3 to 5 years, how can they sort of have that jump start now with limited resources?
Yeah, well, again, it's about taking the steps that they can,
Yeah,
anticipate what their large customers are going to be looking for from them, and that's really the first step on the journey. You know,
yeah,
and it's going to be their certified carbon footprint. It's going to be tracking that, and again, you know, when it comes to doing this, what you don't want to do is get stuck in a world of living in Excels. You want to say, well, how can we automate this? You know, how can we get a picture of this, a sort of near real time picture of this, without having to sort of continually sort of do this number crunching manually? So, you know, use the appropriate technology to do that. And then you're already improving your picture with these large customers. What you'll find as well is that, you know, have a look at the questions that are being asked on supplier onboarding, you know, questionnaires. What's been asked on tenders, they're going to start to align more and more to some of the key elements of CSRD. So
yeah,
you pick out the ones there. What is important to my big customers, and you start addressing those. And then you'll find that you're starting to build up parts of the solution that are going to be there for you and ready for you when you actually
yeah.
do need to do CSRD reporting.
Absolutely. I think I'll wrap up with this question, and I think we have covered this in some capacities, just around what are some of the key features that companies should look for in CSRD compliance softwares?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, well, I think one thing that they will all have, or all need to have, is that, you know, it's a secure system of record. So
Yeah,
that's really the base, the foundation. You know, you need to know that you can control the access. that you have a proper audit trail of any changes, that you have traceability back to the original system or the original document. So, that's pretty much a given. One thing that I do like to sort of impress upon people is ask what's the carbon footprint of the technology itself. There's a lot of software companies have sort of jumped on this space because they see an opportunity. But the ones that are doing it and sort of really sort of are addressing their footprint as well. This is the footprint of using our technology. That's a very good sign in terms of a brand that is genuinely committed to sustainability. So that's one other thing that I'd say. The obvious one is the user experience, because no matter how good a technology is, if it's not easy to adopt, it's not going to get used. So like something that gives you that real-time dashboard that is sort of, you go in and you don't find it daunting, you immediately say, okay, that makes sense, I can go in there, is something that you have given yourself the best chance of success with. Another one is what are the connector capabilities? So like there's a lot of them that would say, okay, we can give us a CSV and we can do something with it, but does it have APIs? Does it have pre-built connectors? For a large organization that is taking huge amounts of data, it really needs to be able to set up a connector and say, that's going to automatically flow. I do the heavy lifting once it comes in, it does the calculation. So those would be the things that come to mind. And in terms of not just connecting coming in, but if there's certain things in terms of connecting going out, because CSRD is one big outcome, but what about other things that you like to do? So external certification. So you might have your EcoVadis certification or your B Corp certification or your carbon disclosure project. What about, I have this information in there. How do I get it in? How do I sort of get that in and connect out to that? Carbon disclosure project, it used to be, when I last did it for an organization I was working for, it was like painting the Golden Gate Bridge with you start at one end, you got to the other, you had to go back to the other thing. You were always sort of crunching these Excels to get it in there. So that's really where I developed the interest in doing this with better technology. So so think about the connectors in. Think about other than the CSRD report, what can you push out, and then obviously look at the price. That's probably the other thing is like, what's that going to cost per seat, per user? Is it all you can eat data? Is it what is the pricing model? Those are the things that come to mind.
Yeah. All brilliant points, but we're unfortunately out of time. So thank you so much, Mark. That was a very interesting discussion, and I hope everyone who joined the call, of course, took value from it. But needless to say, of course, we'll be having many more of these discussions and webinars throughout the year. We'll try to branch away from CSRD and look at other interesting topics as well across these sessions. So feel free to attend these events, keep a lookout on our website, on our LinkedIn page for all of these sessions that we've planned for this year. And of course, thank you once again, Mark. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And stay tuned, everyone, for our insightful session series. Like I said, we'll be bringing many more experts to these forums to just discuss, of course, CSRD, DMA, decarbonization, all interesting topics. And I look forward to seeing many of you there. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks, Mark, again.
Thanks, Nadia. Bye now.